This is Annette for Perspectives on Live. I would like to talk a little bit today about climate change and the effects of climate change in my community and in communities near to me. We just have seen back-to-back hurricanes hit the U.S. Gulf Coast over the past few months. Recently, Milton, a Category 3, described as one of the strongest storms to form in the Gulf of Mexico, hit the Tampa Bay area just recently, knocking out power to more than 3 million people, knocking out industry such as the fertilizer business, and slowing fertilizer production and shipments down at a time that's critical for the corn industry that is starting full planting season. Prior to Milton, just a few weeks ahead of that storm hitting, we had Hurricane Helene, which was catastrophic, still discovering loss of life, catastrophic to property and to business. And prior to that, we had Hurricane Beryl, which is a smaller storm, but nonetheless wreaked tremendous havoc in the Houston, Texas area, which hosts some of the largest area globally of refining and petrochemical complexes, knocked out over power to more than 2.5 million people, and really subdued the city for almost 2 weeks. Why does all of this matter? Because we work in the energy and the commodity markets, and climate change, by most accounts and by many in this industry, are viewed as an existential threat. How we deal with it is not always an agreed upon topic of conversation. But in the energy markets, we do see a number of changes and shifts by oil and gas companies that are looking to see, how do we mitigate our greenhouse gases? How do we lower that impact for the global community, as well as our local communities that have been impacted by storms? One example is a recent announcement by ExxonMobil that is opening up one of the largest sites for carbon capture in the U.S. Gulf. And that will have a tremendous impact in terms of the ability to capture CO2 from some of the oil and gas, as well as potentially refining sectors in that area. At Platts, we designed this year a decarbonization index, and that index is looking at the voluntary carbon markets. And we have seen a steady rise in pricing in that decarbonization index since we launched it earlier this year. In fact, the price of voluntary carbon of that index has shown a rise in pricing of over $2 per metric ton of CO2. That's largely been driven by removal credits. There's a shortage of removal credits. The market is looking at different ways that it can remove carbon from the atmosphere, and this is really seen as one of the really leading ways that we are going to be able to rapidly and more quickly lower the greenhouse gas emissions around the world. So we want to keep an eye on this decarbonization index. We are headed into a major election here in the US with table stakes for presidential candidate, but also for our legislative branches in the Senate and in the House of Representatives. And those outcomes will have impacts politically on how we move forward with climate change. But I am convinced, based on what we're seeing in the carbon markets, as well as what we're seeing in the energy and industrial sectors, that we're going to see businesses continue to take this very seriously, no matter the political outcomes that we'll see in November. And that's my perspective. Thank you.